Hello, everyone. Well, 20 million people have thyroid disease, with majority of them being unaware of the situation. Can natural therapies help with treatment and deliver success outcomes? In our session today, we are going to talk about thyroid from an Ayurveda perspective. I am Amita from Nourish Talk, a platform for natural and holistic therapies. Presenting this session, we have Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum, who has authored a book on healing with thyroid with Ayurveda. Dr. Marianne has been in private practice for over 30 years, using in-depth principles of Ayurveda in her practice with outstanding results. I am excited to introduce her. Welcome, Dr. Marianne.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
Great. Let's get started then. We will move on to the first slide. And maybe you could start for our viewers. What is Ayurveda and how does it affect thyroid?
Well, here it's stating that Ayurveda is a 5,000-year-old tradition from India. Whereas in America, lots of people decide to seek out alternative care, but we're a fairly new country and we haven't really yet established a tradition of holistic medicine. And we don't even know most of our herbs yet. So it's good to see what they're doing in Ayurveda. And that's what I did myself. I decided 35 years ago when I opened my practice that I wanted to treat people with herbs and somehow tried to keep them off pharmaceuticals if possible. And there wasn't anyone to teach me about any herbs because, again, there's not that many herbal pharmacies here in America. There's not much knowledge of herbs, and there's hardly any doctors who use herbs exclusively in their practice. So I was kind of just reading some herb books, and I started studying Ayurveda. And I was very fortunate in that one of Ayurveda's best physicians came to America and to start making formulas for one of the first Ayurvedic companies, Maharishi Ayurvedic Products International. So he was their star formulator. And he set out to train me. I was the one using Ayurveda the most back then in the early 1980s. It was hardly heard of back then. So I was using Ayurveda at a very high level, but he felt that he needed to train me in person because of the level I was at that time. And there were no books to learn, and there were no schools of Ayurveda in America at that time. So he came in person and for 20 years sat with me. We saw thousands of patients together, and he made over 500 formulas for what we were seeing in my practice. He passed on 3 years ago, and I decided that the knowledge that he gave me was so important for people to know because he never had a chance to train other doctors at the level he had trained me. So I decided the best way I could do this to get the information out to both practitioners and the lay patient was to write books. And I started with the thyroid because I treat everything in my practice, everything that walks in the door, so many diseases. But thyroid's the most common. It's at such an epidemic level, not only here in the United States, but around the world. And as you read my book, you'll see why that is, but also what to do about it. So here's just talking about some of the things that we look at in Ayurveda. One of the things we look at is that it's 6 to 9 stages of a disease process that a patient will go through as they work their way towards a disease. And the ancient doctor said in these first 2 stages of imbalances, things could be going out of balance in the physiology, but there won't be any symptoms yet. By the 3rd and 4th stage, you could have symptoms, but there's no disease, and you wouldn't be able to detect it yet with modern medical diagnostic tools. And then in the 5th and 6th stage, you could diagnose it. So the goal of medicine should be to see where you are, what's out of balance, and reverse those imbalances so you don't get to the 5th and 6th stage of a disease. But in America, doctors are trained to diagnose and treat disease, and they have no ways of detecting imbalances. That's where Ayurveda comes in really handy, and especially with the thyroid gland. Throughout the book, I'll talk about the 7 tissues. We don't have time here now to go through all that, but the 7 tissues in the body that require nourishment are the blood plasma, the blood, muscle, fat, nerve, bone marrow, and reproductive fluids. In here, I'll talk tonight a little bit about Vata, but in the book, you'll learn about these elements in nature that the ancient doctors described as Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. These are the elements that are behind the scenes in all the body's physiology, controlling everything. And unless we understand how they work, we won't be able to get to the root of the problem if we don't know how to fix the imbalances that occur in these. And instead, we're always looking at the more superficial manifestations of these elements called Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. The subdoshas we'll talk about in the book. These are just subsections of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Tonight, we'll talk about Ojas and the 4 types of toxins. They also look, of course, at the mind, the body, the emotions, and the spiritual life in Ayurveda. But the number one thing they look at, first and foremost, the ancient doctor said, before writing any prescription, is to look at what they call the hetu, the etiology, before prescribing any treatment, which is something that's never done in this country. As we go through, I'll show you what I mean. We could go to the next slide then.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Is that something you do, or can I do it?
It's up to you. If you want to do it, that's fine with me. I can do it.
Yeah, you can do it. I'm hitting it. It's not moving. So.
Okay, I'll do it. No problem.
Okay. Okay.
So we are at the thyroid patients, what kind of problems they encounter.
Okay. So there's basically 2 types of thyroid patients you'll meet. First are people who have all kinds of thyroid symptoms: hair falling, weight gain for no good reason, depression, constipation. They might have a history of miscarriages. The list of thyroid symptoms goes on. And yet when they go to their doctor and have blood work drawn, it comes back normal. The doctor says everything's fine, and they leave the office feeling somewhat frustrated. The other type of patient you'll see are those who have these thyroid symptoms, and their blood work does show they have problems with the thyroid. They're put on the thyroid hormone, but they still have their symptoms because they're not getting to the root of the problem. That's what the book's about. So we could go to the next slide. So here's 2 approaches. The allopathic, that's modern mainstream medicine, their approach, and the holistic approach, holistic meaning what we know right now in the United States. So the allopathic approach is to give the thyroid hormone. They could either use a synthetic one like levothyroxine, Synthroid, or they could use one that's more natural like Nature Throid, Westroid. These are made from pig and cow thyroid glands. The problem with that approach is that when you take the hormone, your thyroid gland actually goes into hibernation. It says, oh good, I don't need to make the hormone anymore. It stops making it, and it starts to shrivel up, literally. And so the original reason why the thyroid was weak was never addressed. And in fact, this is making it weaker. It might take away some of your symptoms, but in Ayurveda, we always love to get to the root of the problem and fix it. And these can be fixed. The alternative medicine view, which the alternative medicine we know so far in America, is to use some herbs that we've learned about, along with what we call nutraceuticals. Like a nutraceutical is synthetically made in a lab, just like the pharmaceuticals are, at a much higher dose that occurs in nature. Like L-tyrosine is used a lot for thyroid problems, iodine, glutathione, alpha lipoic acid, some of the things I list here. We could go to the next slide. So the Ayurvedic approach is a lot different. First, we want to find the underlying cause. In a minute, we'll talk about many of the causes that we can see with the thyroid gland. Keep in mind that the thyroid gland is very delicate, and it's the only gland whose hormones affect every cell in the body. And in reverse, anything that's off in the body kind of reverberates back to the thyroid, and the thyroid just shrivels and gets very weak. So you have to see what that patient's doing wrong, make sure they stop doing that, and then you support the gland with herbs, and it usually perks right back up. So in Ayurveda, we're going to use herbs, food, and spices to heal, and also teach the patient proper diet, because there's certain foods in the diet that could help the thyroid. The thyroid makes its hormones out of animal protein. So if you have a vegan who's not getting enough animal protein, or a vegetarian who only occasionally has some milk or paneer or cheese, the thyroid gland is going to really struggle to work, see? So we have to take a look at the diet, the daily routine. What time do they go to bed? The ancient doctors said that human beings were made to be awake when the sun is up and asleep when the sun goes down. It's all very basic, but we all break those basic laws of nature. And the thyroid, being very delicate, will get weak from that, especially if you go to bed past 10 o'clock at night. The thyroid gland cannot handle that kind of stress. We also teach the patients how to detoxify, which is something that we don't do in this country with mainstream medicine. So you could go to the next slide. Here's some symptoms if the thyroid gland is low. Brain fog, your hair is thinning, you can have a goiter, your heart can beat irregularly. I see many people, the heartbeat is irregular, and doctors right away put them on medication to try to force it to beat regularly, when meanwhile the thyroid's weak. I had a patient once who came in and I felt their pulse. That's how we diagnose in Ayurveda. You can feel all the organs and glands in the pulse. In the book, I'll describe in very good detail exactly what it is we feel in the pulse. It's amazing how the ancient doctors figured all this out thousands of years ago, that you could feel every aspect of the physiology in the pulse. And so I felt his pulse, his heart was beating very irregularly. I thought he was going to have a heart attack. And I said, you need to go see your physician. You have to get on medicine because this arrhythmia is severe. He said, I already am on medicine. And I saw it wasn't working. So we had to go through everything. I had to see what he was doing wrong. And in his case, he was eating and taking soy supplements. He was eating a lot of tofu and soy. Soy has something in it called isoflavones, which I'll talk about in great detail in the book. And it upsets the thyroid function. So I told him, you know what, I'm not going to give you any remedies. For just 2 weeks, stop the soy supplements and all the tofu and the soy protein powder, and come back. Let me feel your pulse. And when he came back, the rhythm was totally normal. That's what we mean by getting to the root cause. So lots of times they're treating these arrhythmias, and there's numerous reasons why it's arrhythmic. And especially lots of times they're missing the fact that the thyroid's weak. Constipation, same thing here. When a doctor hears you're constipated, they'll put you on Miralax to go, and you'll go. But if you go to a more natural doctor, they might use Senna or Cascara Sagrada. And even in Ayurveda, we have remedies. But when the thyroid's weak, I have a whole chapter on the gallbladder. The gallbladder won't empty well. And the gallbladder releases bile, which gives you the urge to move your bowel. So many of these people I see that are constipated, it's because the gallbladder's not sufficiently secreting the bile. Irregular menstrual cycles, infertility and miscarriages. When I hear someone has a menstrual cycle every 2 weeks, or she's skipping them totally, maybe gets one every few months, I know automatically that her thyroid gland is weak. If someone comes to me and says they've been diagnosed with polycystic ovary disease, I know the thyroid gland is weak, and we have to see why. Because then after that, you get a whole cascade of events that happens once the thyroid's weak. The gallbladder doesn't empty the bile, and it's the bile that carries out the excess estrogen every day. So if the bile's not flowing, the estrogen reabsorbs and you start growing cysts on the ovaries. So they name it polycystic ovary, but no one's giving any good treatment on it. Lots of women I see have miscarriages, and they say, oh, they tested my hormones, they're fine. But again, they're in the early stage of a thyroid problem. It's not going to show up yet on blood work, but we can feel it when we feel their pulse. We feel the thyroid throbbing. It's not working right, so they'll have a miscarriage. So many, many women who are having miscarriages are going undiagnosed, and they have problems with the thyroid. But still, you have to see why the thyroid's weak. Depression, same thing here. Many people I see are on antidepressants, and when I test them, the thyroid's weak. Weight gain, of course, that's obviously thyroid. Dry skin, dry hair, fatigue, these are all symptoms of low thyroid. See, what we don't want to do is start chasing symptoms around the body. You can easily do that, whether it's holistic medicine, even Ayurvedic medicine, or allopathic medicine. And unfortunately, most people I see, this is exactly what they're doing. Some are doing it using pharmaceuticals, and some of it are doing it using nutraceuticals, but they're just patching up these symptoms and no one's getting to the root of the problem. When the thyroid's hyper, you can have the opposite, rapid heartbeat, also irregular rhythm, palpitations. You lose your appetite. You can lose a lot of weight easily. You're very nervous and hyper irritable. You could have panic attacks, hard time falling asleep, short periods, your eyes can protrude, you can get tremors, you could sweat a lot. Same thing here. I see people who have hyperthyroid, and many times I see it's the mercury from their flu shots. They've gotten 20 flu shots because they're nurses or they're teachers or they work with patients and they have to get flu shots. There's mercury in the flu shot. I'm not anti-vax, but that's the truth. So the thyroid gets confused. It sees the mercury. It looks almost exactly like iodine. And the thyroid's the only gland who uses iodine. So whatever iodine you take into the body, it goes directly to the thyroid so it can make its hormones. So when mercury comes in, the thyroid actually prefers the mercury over the iodine. And now the thyroid's going to get really out of whack when mercury's sitting on it. And you can feel that in the pulse. I can't tell you how many people I feel mercury and other heavy metals like fluoride from the drinking water. It's poisoning the thyroid. Many townships around the country put fluoride in the water. And a lot of other countries know better than to do that, but we don't know that here. And some people think that it's one of the causes of all this epidemic of thyroid that we're seeing. And I would say that's true. It's one of the causes, but there's many causes I see. I've also seen people get CAT scans with iodine, and the iodine is 300 times higher than what the thyroid can use, and it can throw the thyroid into hyperthyroid. These are just some of the things I see all the time, and I'm just giving you an idea that if someone says, oh, you have hyperthyroid, don't think of it like that. Think of, why do I have hyperthyroid, or why do I have hypothyroid? See? So I train our patients to go a little deeper than that. Now, in Ayurveda, they pride themselves in saying that this tradition uses their remedies that contain prana. Prana is that healing vibration. It's the combination of the vibration from the sun and the moon. These are the Sanskrit words. The sun's energy they call Agni. It's like a fire. Moon is Soma. It's very cooling. And Marut is what controls the flow of the Agni and Soma, this heat and cooling energy in the body. I'll go into this in very good detail. It's good to know about prana, but basically what you need to know about prana is that that vibration is what's hitting the food as it's growing out in the fields. It's hitting the herbs. It's hitting the water as it flows down the mountain streams. That vibration gets imparted into the food and water. And then when we eat that food or drink that water, it gets imparted into us. And what it does in our bodies is that it gives intelligence to the cells. Every cell in your body is vibrating intelligence. And that's how your cells know how to perform all their thousands of functions. It comes from the pranic energy, provided we don't kill the prana by microwaving the food, freezing it, putting it in boxes and cans, processing it. The same with the water. If we put chlorine in the tap water, it kills the prana. So you can filter out the chlorine, but you can't bring the prana back to life. So we teach our patients, and also the book will discuss it, where the good water is, because water is important. 90% of every cell in your body is composed of water. So the water has to have two properties. It has to have the prana, and it has to have an alkaline pH, but I don't want to get into that now. So in Ayurveda, we're using things that were grown in nature. See, herbs, food, and spices. They're all grown outside. The sun and the moon are hitting them. We eat them. And then we could say the food coming in is very intelligent. You could go to the next slide. So now, we'll talk about this in a minute. In modern medicine and what we consider holistic medicine, they're not aware of prana. So all of allopathic medicine is using medicines that were made synthetically in a lab. What they said was, herbs have these active ingredients. We can synthetically make them in a much higher dose in a lab. And they do, they have an effect, but they also come riddled with side effects and toxicity. So then the holistic people came along and said, we're not going to use that approach. We don't like that so much. But food has these things called vitamins in them. Vitamin C, vitamin A, B complex. Why don't we make them in a lab in a much higher dose? So they ended up making the same mistake that the pharmaceutical companies and holistic and allopathic medicine made. Again, it's not to say they don't work, But when you start taking all these B complex and glutathione and all these things, there's no prana there. So there's going to be some side effect, and it's going to be toxic to the liver and kidneys. Okay, so this is just one little excerpt from the book. There are several reasons, a couple of which I just mentioned about the thyroid, the fluoride in the water, the mercury in the flu shots, but this is another reason. Vata in nature is in our bodies. Vata is the element of space, air, dryness, coldness, quickness, movement, and Vata controls the movement of things, the movement of circulation of blood, the movement of food through the digestive tract. So if there's too much movement, if the person's kind of hyper and they go through the day in a big rush like that, and they don't know about Vata, maybe they jog a lot and there's too much activity, it weakens the thyroid. So here I wrote about the fact that we have to learn what Vata is and then how to pacify. Otherwise, whatever remedy you take for the thyroid, whether it's our ashwagandha or shilajit or someone else's L-tyrosine or natural thyroid hormone, unless you know how to balance this hyperactivity, this Vata in the body, the thyroid will always be weak. You could go to the next slide. So if you know what Vata is, here it says it's light, then you do the opposite. So you want a little bit of a heavier diet. You don't want a diet that's like salads or like a vegan diet where it's very light. If Vata is cold, then you want the opposite. You want warm cooked foods like seen in this picture. So you want cooked, you want to add heat to the food. It'll balance the Vata. If Vata is dry, you want some unctuousness, like having ghee. In the book, I'll describe what ghee is, how to make it, olive oil, sesame oil. The book will go through all the different types of nutrients. There's a whole chapter on the diet. If Vata is quick, I teach the patients how to slow down and don't rush through the day. And don't go to bed past 10. It makes the Vata go high in the body. And keep your body warm. See, also get out in nature. Nature can pacify Vata. Sometimes when we're very nervous, we feel so much better if we get out in nature. And I have a big section in the book on what are called oil massages. The Sanskrit name for it is abhyanga. It's where the ancient doctors thousands of years ago said that the skin can make hormones. And if you rub the body with oil, because the hormones are made out of fats, you rub the body with oil, and we have a dozen different oils that we use depending on whatever the problem is. But the oil, we let it sink in for 20 minutes. That's how long it takes to go into the body. And then the skin will start manufacturing hormones. It helps detox. It's good for the joints. It lubricates them. There's a lot of reasons why we would want to do these oil massages, but one of them is it pacifies Vata because, again, Vata it's very light. So you want to, and it's dry. So we want more unctuousness in the body. In the book, I talked about the fact that they just discovered, and they're so excited, modern medicine, that the skin makes hormones. So now all this research is being done. But Ayurveda always knew that. So it's kind of interesting that they're verifying what the ancient doctors said without microscopes. You could go to the next slide.
I just wanted to comment on the oil massages that you mentioned. If someone wanted to do it at home, what kind of oil would you recommend that they do?
I talk about it in the book. In general, you could use almond oil in the colder months and coconut oil right now in the summer months when it's very hot. That's in general. Again, in our practice, we have about a dozen different types of oils dependent. We have one specifically for the thyroid, but in general, if the person knows nothing about Ayurveda and they don't have an Ayurvedic practitioner, they could just use almond oil or coconut oil.
Okay.
But here it tells you the things, again, that will imbalance Vata. Cold diet, smoothies, by the way, it's a big no-no. Cold foods, cold beverages, ice cold, raw foods, they're very light. Salads, these are the foods all the vegetarians in America are eating. It's just throwing their Vata so high, so you can imagine the thyroid's just not liking this. Especially, we're seeing so many people make smoothies with kale and spinach, and kale has something in it. And the ancient doctors warned this too. They said many vegetables have problems associated with them, and the problems will go away if you cook them. Now we know kale has something in it called goitrogens, which affect the thyroid gland. But if you cook it, it evaporates out. See, and spinach too has oxalates, just like kale. And if you cook it, it evaporates out. Oxalates pull all the minerals out of the bones. So we have all these people juicing kale and making smoothies, and they're weakening their thyroid gland. A light diet, like a raw foods diet, we don't hear about that as much anymore, but for a little while there, it was kind of something everybody was doing. Avoiding animal protein. Again, the thyroid hormone is made from animal protein. To me, it's always interesting. The ancient doctors were strict vegetarians, and this is what they said in their textbooks. You need something from an animal at every meal. So if you're a vegetarian, that would come from milk and milk products. Now, in the book, I'll have a big section on milk because I've lectured all around the United States and Canada. And every time I mention milk, I get a lot of flack, to the point where some people get up and walk out of the lecture, or maybe I've been asked never to come back again. Like, how dare I recommend milk? So we have a big misunderstanding about milk in this country, to the point where the whole dairy industry is going down the tubes. It turns out that milk is it's the only food that can make ojas immediately. Let's go to the next slide. I think I talk about ojas there. Oh no, we'll talk about it in a minute. But anyway, this ojas is your hormones and neurotransmitters. They help the way you feel, happiness and all that. And the food that you eat spends 3 to 5 days in each of the 7 tissues before it moves on to the next food. So when you eat the food, it goes into the blood plasma, 3 to 5 days, the blood, 3 to 5 days, muscle, fat, nerve, but like that. So the food you eat today won't nourish all 7 tissues until about a month from now. And at the end of the 7th tissue, you form something called ojas. Our hormones, our immunity to disease. It gives us a healthy glow and stamina, makes you very happy, and it keeps the neurotransmitters balanced in the brain. So the only food that can make ojas immediately and go through all 7 tissues immediately is milk, if you get good quality milk and you take it in the correct way, which we don't do in this country. So lots of people are having problems with milk because of the way we process it, and then we take it incorrectly. And then it forms a poison in the gut. So everyone's calling milk the poison. So I'll address that in the book, but it's an important point to understand, especially if you decide you want to be vegetarian. Now, the thyroid, like I slightly mentioned before, and I was alluding to, is very sensitive to toxins and inflammation and malnutrition. We'll just go through very quickly. You could go to the next slide. There's 4 types of toxins. I'll go into them in detail. The first toxin, ama, gets produced when the food doesn't digest well. It just remains, when you eat food, as it's going through the digestive tract, it has to break down into very small particles. So it comes out of there and gets absorbed into the bloodstream. If the food's too heavy, like peanut butter or chia seeds or hard cheeses or tofu, the food won't absorb, or if something's wrong with digestion. So we always have to fix every new patient's digestion, look at their diet so that they're not forming ama from the food. Ama means partially digested food that didn't get in your cells and it's just sitting in your intestines and it's just clogging it. Now, as the ama sits there, it starts to rot and ferment, and it forms a highly acidic, dangerous toxin called ama visha. The word visha means poison. So now you actually made poison from your food, and this ama visha creates inflammation because it's hot and reactive. And then it depends on where it goes in the body, but it sets the stage for autoimmune diseases and cancer, because with both, the inside of the cell is very hot. People talk about inflammation, but they never talk about where it's coming from. So I'll have a whole section in the book about what causes inflammation, but ama visha is one of the things that can cause it. So it's very important that you fix your digestion and you know what foods can enter your cells easily. Gar visha are chemicals from the outside world. At least here in America, most of us are over-medicated. One of the things, my intake questions I have for every new patient is, did you ever take birth control pills, flu shots, acid reflux medicines, long-term antibiotics? And any one of those four, those types of medicines long-term, any medicine we call Garvisha, chemicals made in the outside world, whether it's pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, all those vitamins are in this category, that's a toxin, and air pollution, pesticides, heavy metals. In the book, I'll go into more detail as to the type of harm that they can create, but the thyroid is sensitive to all these. And the final is electromagnetic radiation from computers, cell phones, and cell phone towers and that type of thing. But I will give tips on how to get rid of those four types of toxins in the book. So you can get inflammation in the body from infections in the gut. Literally every new patient I see has an overgrowth of Candida albicans yeast. From taking antibiotics, birth control pills in the past, they destroy the friendly bacteria and you get an overgrowth of yeast in the body. And also overheating in the liver from those two types of hot toxins, Amavisha, that you're making inside the body, and Garvisha, all the chemicals from the outside. That combination, all of those toxins, the liver has to deal with them all. Just like rain, which is alkaline water, when it goes through air pollution, it becomes acid rain. What's happening in most everyone's liver in this modern age is that all the toxins that we have now, and keep in mind, a newborn baby already has 250 chemicals in their blood. That's all going through the liver. The liver's really overheated, and the liver makes the blood, and now the whole body's overheated. So a lot of inflammation in the body's coming from these two factors. You could go to the next slide. Again, malnutrition, if your digestion's weak, you'll make low ojas because you can't go through the 7 tissues and make ojas at the end. Or if the diet is malnourished, like these very, some people we see are so allergic to every food they eat because the liver is so reactive, it's turning all the food into Amavisha immediately, into poison. So everyone's saying, oh, it's because you have this gluten sensitivity. Oh, and a dairy sensitivity. Oh yeah, and so many other foods. So many people we see can't eat so many foods anymore because of the disruption in the liver and the gut. So when the digestion's weak, you can't nourish the body. You're not going to extract the nutrients from the foods, and that will make low ojas too. You could go to the next slide. So ojas, again, is formed once the food is nourishing and it goes through the 7 tissues and you have good digestion. But again, if either one is weak, then ojas will be low. And again, ojas is the hormone. So if someone's telling you you're not making enough thyroid hormones, you have to look at all these factors. You can't just say, okay, my digestion's poor, my diet's really bad, I have a history of taking lots of birth control pills, I'll just take this hormone, thyroid hormone, without addressing all these other factors. Okay, you could go to the next slide. And these things too can deplete ojas. Too much stress, malnourishment, if you over-exercise, too much sexual activity, if you're bleeding too much with your menstrual cycle, or if you're dehydrated. Okay, you could go to the next slide. Now, it is possible to get off your thyroid hormones if you haven't been taking them too long. It depends on how much your thyroid has gone into hibernation, how much it might have disintegrated. I've seen people, a lot of people get off their thyroid hormones, even some who've been on it a little longer than 4 or 5 years. But you have to do it gradually as we increase these other factors. And our goal isn't just to get people off thyroid hormone, but to get to the root of their problem. Because the root of the problem, if it created that problem with the thyroid, could create other problems, see? So if you have a lot of mercury, you have to pull that out because that mercury could hurt your nerve tissue and cause like a neuropathy. See? So we want to really fix everything and try to make the thyroid as strong as we can. So that was my lecture for today. Do we take questions at this point then?
Yes. Let's see. I do see quite a few attendees, so I want to open it up for questions.
Okay.
We'll just wait for a moment. So while we're waiting for the questions, so I just want for the viewers to know that there is hope for them for thyroid. How much time would it take for them, let's say, in your patients when they walk into your door with their thyroid problem? How much time does it take for them when they start feeling normal with the normal thyroid functions?
It depends on each person, because it depends how complicated the case is, how many layers have been ignored all these years in their life, and we have to strip through those layers. I just had someone today who has been treating with their thyroid for years with an endocrinologist, and they totally ignored the reason why the thyroid was weak. She told me in 1 month she's already lowering her medicine and she feels great. And then I've had others where it might take them a year to get off their medicine. But usually within that first year, you'll start to notice a lot of changes. Anyone would, if you're eating healthier, going to bed earlier, getting in the sunshine, fixing all these imbalances in the body, and then just supporting the thyroid. It usually perks back up really well. That's why I felt compelled to write the book. People are just taking the hormone, and I still see them in the office on the hormone, and they're still complaining that their hair is falling. And that's how I opened the book, with a little girl who was bald. She had been to modern medicine and a holistic doctor who put them, the first one put her on lots of steroid injections in the scalp and thyroid hormone. Then the holistic doctor put her on all these vitamins, which made her sicker. She was only little, trying to take all these vitamins, which are toxic to the liver. So when I saw her, I told the mother to gradually reduce the thyroid hormone because it was just making everything worse, and that we would fix the reason why the thyroid was weak. She had numerous reasons, but during that first year, her hair grew back completely. In the book, I show the pictures. I kept taking pictures of her as her hair was growing back. That's the usual thing we see. Over the course of several months, they get better.
So, and I remember reading that case study actually on your Facebook page as well. It's a beautiful transformation, the way that girl grew her hair. So, maybe you could spend a couple of minutes talking about, you use some of the herbs. So what are the common herbs? I know this is an educational session and this is not meant for treatment, but what are some of the herbs that you use commonly?
Just so you know, in that little girl's case, I didn't use one thyroid herb.
Oh my
Because
God.
what I did, say, the thyroid herb is the last thing you want to do. So I don't want to give people the impression my thyroid's weak, I'm going to take ashwagandha, for instance. That's an herb we use in Ayurveda for the thyroid, or shilajit. And I'll talk about those in the book. Because if you have all these other factors weakening the thyroid, they're not going to do too much. And then you'll think, I don't think Ayurveda works, So especially if you have Hashimoto's. We didn't even talk about that tonight because that opens up another whole can of worms with the autoimmune disease of the thyroid. You really don't want to take ashwagandha if you have that, because with autoimmune, it means the liver is really overheating and it's pushing you into autoimmune. So many of the Ayurvedic herbs are heating, so you can't use them, like shilajit. But in the book, I describe what we do instead. We use transdermal application, where we put the herbs on the skin. So they go right in from the skin into the blood, and they're bypassing the liver. If you take them orally, you run the risk of making more autoimmune as you heat up the liver.
Okay, that's very interesting. It's very interesting. And then
a lot of what people are doing, like Hashimoto's, again, it's autoimmune. It's a little different than just hypothyroid. In that instance, the immune system's attacking the thyroid, and the thyroid can't work. And then you have that sequence of events. The gallbladder doesn't work, and you go down the line. So you have to see what upset the immune system. So the immune system is the friendly bacteria in the gut, the liver, and the bone marrow. So you have to clean the bone marrow. You have to cool down the heat in the liver, bring intelligence back to the liver to stop heating up like that, clean those old toxins out of the liver that are heating it, and regrow the friendly bacteria. That's what I did in that little girl's case. She had all three effective. Once we fixed her immune system, her thyroid regrouped on its own and her hair grew back. See what I'm saying? So we can't just say, oh, take ashwagandha. And in fact, if she had taken it, it's such a hot herb. See, the first thing you learn in Ayurveda when you learn the herbs, are they cooling or heating? And ashwagandha and shilajit are both very heating. So you can't take them when the liver's overheating. But again, you have to take them in other forms, which my teacher had to develop once he came here from India. And he took everyone's pulse. He said, everyone in America, the pulse is so high. He said, you guys are over medicated here, and your diet is so bad with chemicals and processing that everyone's liver's hot. So he had to develop a whole new way of giving the Ayurvedic herbs. That's another whole thing I talk about in the book.
So you would use the panchakarma as one of the therapies to detox, which is
No,
slightly, no, wow,
no,
okay.
he had to even revamp that, and I'll talk about that in the book too. Panchakarma is great at removing toxins. It's so great that we can't use it in this modern era because the toxins that we have weren't written up in the ancient texts. They didn't have flu shots with mercury and all these chemicals.
That's
They
right.
didn't have birth control pills. They didn't have antibiotics that kids take for 3 years for acne. See, the list goes on and on. We didn't have air pollution, on and on and on, bug spray that you put on your skin. So when he came to see me, he had to totally revamp Ayurveda. That's why he was a genius, because the other doctors are still doing what they said in the ancient texts. And he did too. He made all his formulas from the ancient texts. But the ancient doctor said, we can't foresee what's going to happen in the future. So we're depending on the future doctors to write new chapters in Ayurveda. That's what he did. And that's another message that I get out in the book. When he came to sit with me in my practice, I remember him, he laid out all the herbs, the ashwagandha and the liver cleanses, and he knew 700 herbs. He was so well renowned in India, and his father and grandfather for 5,000 years before were Ayurvedic physicians. And at a very high level, they treated the royalty in India. That's why they sent him to America to make formulas for our first Ayurvedic company here. And when he sat with me, he stepped back and he said, I don't know what I'm going to do. He said, these patients, the liver's so hot and reactive, we can't give them these herbs. So he spent about 4 years trying to figure out how to get the herbs in the patients. You see, people today, I hear it every day in my practice. Oh, I can't eat gluten. That bothers me, to the point where all restaurants now have gluten-free. Well, when I was young, we didn't have gluten-free anything. We weren't allergic to gluten back then. I can't have dairy. I have lactose intolerance. Oh, I have a tree nut allergy. All the kids have tree nut allergies. It goes on and on, all the foods people are allergic to. And every day I talk to people, they have about 3 foods left they can tolerate. That I'm okay as long as I don't have grains, no milk, no this, no that. I can have a little bit of protein, just chicken, and maybe a couple vegetables. This is what I hear all day in my practice. And the problem isn't the food, but how corrupted our liver is from all these chemicals going through it. So as you fix the liver, the gut, the bone marrow, the person's immune system, they come out of it, and the food allergies go away. But when he saw this, he had come from a culture, he had come from India, he lived in a little village. He had never seen a country like ours where people were eating such a nasty diet. It's so processed here. And he never saw where people took so many can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yeah, yes, I can. Okay. I was
So,
just, yeah, please, we can hear you, no problem.
Okay. So he had to figure out another way to get the herbs into people. So he developed ways of extracting just the intelligence of the herb and getting rid of the crude herb. But he also had to change up panchakarma, because when you take out toxins, let's say out of the bone marrow, the liver, the cells, they have to travel through physical channels into the bowel movement, urine, and the sweat. In the book, you'll learn all about the physical channels. So because panchakarma works so well at ridding the body of toxins, if you start pouring out these toxins too quickly, these very hot reactive toxins that we have nowadays, they can rupture those channels. So I'll talk about that in the book. So it's the same principle of panchakarma, but he had to switch up a few of the treatments. But he would warn people, don't get panchakarma in India, don't go there, because it could make you worse, because there's too many toxins you Americans have, Maybe some people in India can do it who haven't been raised like we have here with all the pharmaceuticals and all the suitcases of vitamins, but a lot of the Americans can't handle it. So we were seeing more people who had problems with panchakarma than who were getting benefit. We have seen some get benefit, but we saw more problems. Yeah.
Okay, so any questions from the audience? We do want to open it up. Dr. Marianne is very busy. It was very difficult for us to get her here. So please, she's here right now.
I'm never here.
And live with us. She's an author of a best-selling book. Any questions you have for thyroid, she will answer them answer it live for you right now. If not, then I don't see any other questions. If not, please, you're welcome to send us the questions. I have our email written here on this slide, and let us know your feedback on the session and what kind of topics you would like to see. We welcome the feedback all the time. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm just going to call one last time if there are any questions before I wrap up. I just want to make sure sometimes oh, there is a question. When I say wrap up, then the questions come. All right, I have a question. Please go ahead. That's why we are here. That's why we have this session. Tell us, what's your question? I'm just waiting, Marianne, for 1 second. We'll take a couple of questions.
Also, Anita, don't give out that email. That's my personal one. But on my website, if they
this is Karen.com. Don't worry about it. We give out. Yeah, so anyone who has anything, who wants to get in touch with Dr. Marianne, please get in touch with us here at nourishtalk.com, and we will put you in touch. All right, the question is, yeah, no worries about it. So as there are so many factors to see and change, what is the good starting point for a person?
Fix your digestion and change your diet. That's pretty basic.
Basic, okay. Digestion is the Agni that you talked about, the fire in the stomach, and the ama is the undigested food that the stomach or our body is not able to digest, right? I just want to reiterate the two terms that you talked about for the.
That's it in general. I was making a little more specific in this session here, where I was talking about the friendly bacteria in the gut break the food down. The liver, if it's overheating, won't digest right. If the bile's not flowing out of the gallbladder, you can't digest fats right. So that's what I mean by digestion.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, I see something else. Okay, great, thanks. That's the question. All right, so I think, well, thank you so much. A final, let me just see, I see something else. Hang on 1 second. I see a question, let me just see. No, that's all right. So before I wrap up, any final things, Marianne, Dr. Marianne, would you like to say? I know
my book's available. It's called Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda. It's available on Amazon and all the bookstores as well.
Sure.
In the future, I hope to write more books on all the diseases, because from what I can see, none of them are being treated correctly. But just by reading this book, even if you don't have a thyroid problem, you'll learn all of Ayurveda in this book. So I made sure I got everything in.
Great. And we bring a lot of Ayurveda sessions during the week. Please feel free to go on our Facebook page, on Nourish Talk. Throughout the week, we're bringing a lot of Ayurveda sessions from experts. We are also bringing researchers. So give us your feedback. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Marianne for being here. I know she's very busy. Thank you so much for an amazing, amazing session. And this is Amita signing off. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having me too. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.